My first question would be a very provocative question, whether we are able to define what AI is, because we are always speaking about AI, but it's a very vague concept and we don't know what it is. Or at least I asked the panelists that, how would you define AI for yourself and for us?
Okay, I'll start then. Okay, I'm going to talk from the viewpoint of the industry. So as a software vendor, really for us, it's all about data science, especially because I am in the data analytics business. So we really want to leverage all the tools that data science provides to us. And frankly, being of a very lazy nature, we try to use the simplest tool to achieve any task that is given to us. We tend, from a marketing perspective, to call everything AI, and machine learning, supervised, unsupervised, etc., and also AI tools. So it's, to us, really, in general, what we want to help our customers to is make better decisions. And as soon as we provide some heuristics, some algorithms, some strategies that help make sense out of very complex situations in a way that would not be achievable without those toolings or would take a lot of time, I think somehow we've contributed with AI, right? But it's not all about LLMs, and we'll come back to that. But frankly, today, the LLM hype in real, true industrial enterprise software, it's very modest, the applications we've found.
So may I chime in on that? Looking at it from a legal perspective, the EU AI Act, as there was its gestation over several years, a key question was, how do you define AI in the Act? Actually, what they said was use the term AI system. And that definition evolved. There was a lot of discussion on it. Initially, what was essentially used was a definition of the OECD in 2019 that focused on a machine-based system providing predictions and recommendations. And then right before the finalization of the act, the OECD came out with a broader definition that included not only predictions and recommendations, but also content. So you look at the definition, it's so broad, it's almost what's not AI. So for example, Netflix or Spotify, as they call it in Hungary, is AI. It's in the low risk basket and therefore not heavily regulated, but under the definition, it is AI.
Thank you. Mark?
I'll grab that. I'm going to be a lot simpler than this in terms of, as I look at AI, it's saying, how do you get technology to get closer and possibly further than where humans have been in interpreting data? And that's through using, they can take masses and masses of things that humans can't do, and actually coming up with some of the things that humans can do in first. That's why I look at it and say this is artificial intelligence, because I think we like to think ourselves as humans as being real intelligence. So that's my kind of like definition of that, is how close can you get to human intelligence and potentially things like emotional intelligence and those kind of areas, which is scary. But that's my simplistic definition of it.
Balázs?
Yeah, I think. Oh, can you hear me?
I can.
That's great. I think to that point, AI term, artificial intelligence, it sounds a little bit technical. And for some of us, or maybe for some others out there, they can't really interpret or digest why artificial intelligence, that's what we say. So I have this provocative thinking that maybe we should use automation intelligence. And this might sound a little bit over simplifying the question here, but for non-technical people who want to understand the depth, the usage, the benefits of AI, talking about automating stuff might be more helpful to digest, to grasp, rather than artificial intelligence.
Thank you. A few months ago, I was invited to the Hungarian Parliament. There was a symposium on parliaments in the gate of AI. And almost all the speakers spoke about digital applications. So they did really did not know what AI was. So it was very interesting. So it was not a test. It was just, it happened. And it was so interesting because the main word AI was written and everyone wanted to tell something which is digital and hopefully it will be understood by others as AI. Siri just touched or mentioned the word LLM, your large language model, which is one of the most important notion under AI, but just coming back to the previous question, so AI is a sort of synonym of machine learning. Of course, not exactly, and it's broader, but somehow. But in machine learning and language, this is the most important notion, large language model. So this is not used by the average citizens because it is a term, a technical term, but a very important term because one of the AI applications learn language. And language is, how to say, very cheap to train the systems because characters or words are available on the web. So there are other sort of AI applications which are very expensive because medical data is some sensitive data, expensive data, and therefore everyone tends to think that AI is this language application word. So ChatGPT introduced the term. So 2 years ago, exactly 2 years ago, it was November in 22, the journalists started to use this term AI instead of high-level application or something like that. And people tend to think that language applications are AI only. But Cyril has a security software company, doesn't want AI to impair the results of the data analysis performed by their solutions due to hallucinations and poor training. But how do you do it?
Yes, it ties back to the fact that, again, because we are in the data analytics business, to us it is very important that the results, especially because we are used mostly for compliance purposes or risk management purposes. So we cannot present results that are not certain. We need deterministic application of AI or machine learning. As soon as you start playing with those large models that are, for the most part, non-deterministic, and you make predictions that may be correct 50% of the time, maybe 70% of the time, that's not enough for the purpose at heart that our customers bought our product for. And so therefore, theoretically could be applicable and could bring a lot of benefit, but in practice with today's technology, it's not enough. So the only way we can actually leverage that kind of technology right now, and it's been mentioned earlier actually, is in the form of a companion or a co-pilot, an assistant, again, using the LLM to facilitate the way the user can dialogue with the machine because it understands language and also can guide the user, again, into making better decisions, but not in any case making true predictions at that stage. It's not accurate enough to truly make predictions.
It's interesting when I listen to this and people have a big critique of AI saying hallucinations and biases and things like that. Human beings have hallucinations and biases all the time. And as I look at it in my past life, I would have various consultants working for me. I would always look at that consultant's work and see what they did and double check it and ask questions. And I think when you look at AI and some of the things that are generated there, I think having this concept of the human in the loop is still incredibly important, not just taking blindly believing what your model is coming out with. And I do think it's a fantastic co-pilot or assistant and faster and arguably cheaper than some of the people that may be employees of yours along the way. So I dismiss a little bit, as long as someone's got that kind of, I can't remember what the expression we used to use at EY was, but as long as you're looking at it and saying, I have to make sure I am comfortable with the answer here, I think it's a huge benefit in many areas.
Mark, it's interesting. You're saying that we are in a way holding the machine to a higher standard than the human, and maybe that's what we shouldn't be doing. Related to that, I was thinking about what Foreign Minister Martoni said at the outset about AI being, or perhaps the question of our time, and then the second speaker from the Janos von Neumann Institute. And it reminded me of an article that Janos von Neumann, or as he liked to be known in the US at the Institute for Advanced Study, Johnny von Neumann, wrote in 1955 called Can We Survive Technology? And at that time, what was the question of the time? Nuclear energy, nuclear weapons, nuclear war. Can we survive? But if you read that article, it is so fascinating to compare it to what's going on now with respect to AI. One of the things he says, for example, is with the technology, you cannot separate the good from the bad, or what he called it, the lions from the lambs. And that's the issue I think we're struggling with today as well, because if you look at the EU AI Act, they're putting these uses of AI into different baskets, low risk, high risk, prohibited, because they couldn't find a better thing to do. And I admit, I haven't thought of a better thing to do, but it's really not that easy. How are you going to put those systems in those different baskets?
Yeah, I have to say in terms of regulation, there's not many things I agree with Bill Clinton on, but Bill Clinton said in 1997 with the internet, for the internet, the jobs of government should be made to make every effort to get out of the way and not to do harm. And that's not to say you don't have any regulation, but the countries which manage to, I think someone used the expression guardrails, have limited guardrails to allow success of this next revolution will be the ones who are most successful. So I get very nervous about too many you cannots, because that will slow down this revolution. And I think a lot of people say it's going to cost a lot of jobs. So did the Industrial Revolution. It created a lot of jobs. So did the Internet Revolution. It created a lot of jobs. So I do think there's something to be said about.
Although, Mark, as a former EY colleague, can I add a footnote there that in 1996 in the US, in the Telecommunications Decency Act, it provided internet service providers, platforms, YouTube, with this broad liability shield. They still cannot be held liable essentially for anything put on those platforms. And now in the context of EY, the US Congress is saying, we probably went too far there. We should not be giving AY developers and providers such a huge liability shield as they got then there. We should not get that far out of the way. So it's a very interesting discussion.
There's a balance for sure.
So it's an interesting notion, non-deterministic behavior has been mentioned. So it's very important here, because in science you have to repeat an experiment, and that helps you because it makes possible others to see whether it was true or not. And here, if you just click, let it be pre-trained model only or a fine-tuned model, and it gives you a reply, and then you click again and it gives another reply to you. So it's with the same background. So it's a bit, okay, it is called confabulation or hallucination, but for me, it's similar to the dreaming, because the same brain, which is same mind, which is in our brain somewhere, works differently daytime, normally according to the rules of the 3D world, and in the middle of the night, we are able to use the same objects with different relations among each other. And it's very interesting that in this world, no one wants to make a real experiment with that, with the ChatGPT or Copilot or the other Gemini, because it's very natural that it does not give you the same answer, and we just enjoy this very strange behavior. But it's a very important notion here. So if you are not able to repeat it, what to measure, how to see that it's better than the other system. Okay, there are some test beds and a lot of other applications, but it's very difficult to tell whether a system is better than another one. We try to measure it, but it's very difficult. So coming back to the panelists, Mark, the data ownership in the world of AI is very close to your heart, and you mentioned that how the LLMs get access to personal data, which is close to my heart. I mean LLM. So what can you tell about that?
So I think it's interesting. We've talked a lot about some of the various things which LLMs in particular are going to draw upon. huge power needs. 6%, someone was looking at all the power will be used for LLMs, whereas the US has seen a growth of 0.4% in power needs forever. That's going to drive a whole lot of different things. We've talked about cybersecurity, we've talked about the skills. But one of the other things, and it's certainly been mentioned by a lot of the panelists today, is actually getting the data. And we've talked about Elon Musk and Balazs Sider talked about this data being the new oil. Data is the new oxygen for the LLMs. And frankly, some of that oxygen's getting cut off now a little bit. If you look at things like Stack Overflow, which was used extensively for like programmers to solve programs. Once ChatGPT came in, and ChatGPT, by the way, fed itself a lot from Stack Overflow, the amount of contributions there went down. And people are getting smart about their data. We talked about deep fakes, and I think just that's like the start of it. Robert Downey Jr. has said, I'm going to sue anyone who uses my kind of like name, image likeness in any of these large language models or chat GPTs. But even more, I think users are beginning to realize that, hey, all of this is being powered by my data and I'm not getting paid for it. There's about 494 billion, I think they said, in the US alone of data which is being used between the Amazons and the Googles and the Facebooks that is being shared. And users aren't getting paid for any of that. And it's about, I think by our calculations, about $1,800 per person of data. And that's the average person. It doesn't include people like my wife who buy lots and lots of shoes. So someone being able to get access to that data would be even worth more than that. So I think we're starting to see some pushback now about people giving their data freely for use in these technologies and large language models and things like that. So I think the whole aspect of data monetization and people being CEOs of their own data and copywriting their personal data, I think more and more people are going to say, how do I opt out of sharing my data? And then how do I monetize that data personally? And there's a number of platforms which are out there now. And I think there's a grave danger if some of the LLMs who are like these publicly used LLMs and some of the big data brokers who are feeding these don't recognize that individuals now are saying, this is my data. I own this data. I'll give you my data and I'll compensate you for it. And I think you've got an idea that I'm not a huge fan of regulation. Privacy regulation and the increase of privacy regulation is going to make that even more difficult for the large LLMs to get hold of that personal data, which is particularly useful in the consumer products area. You talked about it a little bit in healthcare. There's some huge benefits that can come from using some of this data in healthcare. In terms of one of the companies that an organization I'm working with at the moment is they do like radiology scans and they have thousands and thousands of digital scans at the moment. And what they want to do with some of those digital scans is say, hey, when a radiologist is looking for this, they're only looking at certain markers and things like that. They're not looking at the whole scan, they're looking at certain markers. What if I can get some of that data and then tie it back to the patient's initial consultation with the doctor? And then the ultimate, what happened at the end, and then say, were there more things that we could learn from this data? But there's a whole lot of permission that has to be given by individuals for that to happen, to use their data. And I think users are going to say, you can have my permission, but you got to pay me for it. I think just like the Napster of old, where everyone was, hey, for those of you who are old enough to remember Napster, everyone just took copyrighted information and shared it and said, hey, this is mine, Napster, I'll charge a fee for that, or I won't charge a fee for that. Now the users of that data, which more and more of the individuals are going to say, give me a way to charge for that data, and I'll provide it. And I'll probably provide even more than you could have got in a far more detailed fashion if you provide me with compensation for that data. And I think that's one of the next big things which is going to happen in the world of AI, certainly in the consumer and health spaces.
Thank you. We are in the middle of the problems. Would you get some more information related to EU and US regulatory initiatives related to LLMs and AIs in general?
Sure. A couple things. I assume Robert Downey Jr., whatever his name, Iron Man, is based in California, and under the new California Act, he can sue for appropriation of his digital likeness. Just a couple of reactions to some of the things that have been said previously. It's interesting. Hungary is at the forefront of mammogram analysis and how they use AI, I think, is a perfect sequencing in terms of the human oversight. If a diagnosis is positive, that's the end of it by a human radiologist. If it's negative, it goes to the AI system for a backup check. And if the AI system says, hey, there might be something here, then it goes back to the human radiologist, which is a wonderful, I think, framework to operate on. In terms of environmental issues, we've talked about energy. I don't think we've talked about water usage because there are these various statistics that a little dialogue with ChatGPT uses a liter of water. And something that I find really interesting is the same AI system or systems that are in a way you can say are causing these quote unquote problems with energy, higher energy usage, higher water usage, can be the same thing that can help find the solution through predictions and recommendations and allocation of energy usage and allocations of water. In the US, definitely less regulation than in the EU. The White House executive order did come out almost exactly a year ago. Largely, it's a starting gun to the federal government agencies to start developing guidance for the agencies. However, you have to remember, so many private companies do business with the federal government, whether it be defense contracting or others, that they are going to have to apply with that guidance, and then it's going to probably trickle down further and further into the private sector. However, one rule that does apply to the private sector now is there is so-called dual use AI technology, that is non-potentially military use and military use. Companies not only developing it, but simply having an intent to develop it, have to report to the government on that. Second, there's under consideration, and there's a regulation draft that's been issued by the Department of Commerce that essentially says for US cloud service providers, either in the US or their foreign subsidiaries, will have to vet foreign potential customers, as is done now under Know Your Customer type rules for a bank. Anybody that's trying to open up a bank account in the US knows how difficult that is. I think even the Pope would have to go through an extensive vetting process these days to open up a US bank account. And so under this proposed regulation, there would need to be Know Your Customer vetting taking place for any foreign entity, lest they use those US cloud service providers for nefarious purposes. But by and large, much more hands-off than in the EU on, I think, at the end of the day, the theory that that's the best way to promote economic development and creative development as well.
So legal issues are a sort of danger for the developers, but the danger as a word or term is very frequently mentioned in the everyday life, that dangerous, these tools are dangerous. Are they really dangerous, or how do you think it, Balázs?
Yeah, I think it leads back or goes back to trust probably, because if we can trust a product, if we can trust a solution, then we might consider danger as the second priority or a third priority. Trust leads everything. Since my background is innovation management, innovation design in the digital space, we often face this challenge of how can we design a trustworthy product? Is a process going to be trustworthy? How can we make sure it is? And I think it's the same with AI. We got to design solutions where AI element is just a tool, not a goal. And we have to make sure that it's going to be trustworthy. And how can we make it trustworthy? It's probably the same as traveling going on a holiday with a travel agency. So you need to know, first of all, you need to get there you need to get to your destination. That's the first thing. Second thing is, if you got to change your planes, if there's anything where you need to have certain actions, you need to understand what you need to do. And the third, this experience should be seamless. This is the same thing with AI. So oftentimes we keep talking about AI as a goal, but I think the real goal over here is to design solutions where AI makes us more productive, makes us able to do certain things that we were not able beforehand, but AI should remain on a tool level, not a goal level.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, in international communication, this means the end of the panel, but I hope that I see this sign from this table, this desk. So if you have a question, well, let's say one question, we have time for one question or remark if you have two more. Okay, two short questions.
Thank you. Thank you for the panel. My name is Malna Vamos. I'm from Hungary. I work for Think Institute. And my question is a bit different, like the other perspective, like the defense industry complex more of, because as I look at that, kind of it got isolated from the commercial economy and the very much affected innovation within the defense industrial complex, which is currently a big problem in militaries around the world. And now we're talking about the dual use, of course, of these technologies, and it is a concern in all governments and totally understandable. But my question is this the good way to go to keep that part of the economy isolated and let them basically develop their own AI systems? Or does it good for the trust that we let them, the militaries in the commercial economy, to participate in the AI development process, if that makes sense?
I can comment a little bit. In a lot of the U.S. regulations and the executive order on AI, the military is carved out, perhaps not surprisingly. I don't think there's any way to stop the development and the use of the technology. But that doesn't mean, and I certainly think it's the case for the U.S. and elsewhere, there is still heavy discussions on how these things could be used or should be used in an ethical manner. It was mentioned earlier about the autonomous drones, right? That's a classic example.
Thank you. There is hopefully short question yet.
Yeah, so my question was regarding, thank you very much for the panel. There was, I think, a lot of focus on policies and how there could be changes in a legal sense. What my personal question would be is, if we look at the poster child of AI, which is currently LLM, if we can agree upon that, and most of the money is getting poured into the LLMs, if the architecture of LLMs is fundamentally disallowing for self-reasoning because of its probabilistic nature rooted in Bayesian physics, then what is the next AI going to look like? What paradigm shift do we need to take? Is there something that you already see in the markets, whether it's in quantum mechanics or neuromorphic engineering or whatever? What is going to happen in the future that really is going to bring a change? That's my question.
So I'll start, but just to say that I have no idea, but I fully agree with you. And if you allow me just a little segue, but my feedback from this very interesting, insightful conference, and thank you for having invited Joshua Fogelstein. I think that was extremely interesting to hear him. I think one of the things that distinguish us as a species compared to other animals and vegetables, etc., is not just that we think, but it's that we are at heart romantic, right? So we see ChatGPT and we think, oh, it thinks. But when I was a student, we were programming the game of life and we were saying, oh, it's life. 20 lines of code and you have the appearance of life, right? So I think we always project what are our deepest wishes and dreams that we would find a way to create life, really, or a sentient being. We're not there yet. We're definitely not there yet. I agree with you. Something that is only based on linear algebra, I don't know how we can call that intelligence, whether artificial or not. Automated intelligence, I agree. That's clever. I like it. It brings it back to some cogs and yeah. Yeah. And I don't know what the next step will be, but we're not there yet. No, I don't think so.
So thank you very much. We have been talking about the next steps in AI, but we have not touched the two terms, explainable AI and sustainable AI. Thank you very much.